innards are the stuff of demigods, the children of the goddess, Queen Marika, she who is vessel of the Elden Ring.
Lend me strength, O warriors. Let us become one champion together. I implore you, take what I bequeath from inside me. All vessels are destined to one day break.
Well, you clicked on this video, which means you are just as crazy as I am. Welcome to the party. In my lore videos, I do the best I can to make theories based off of educational discoveries both in-game, as well as countless hours of research outside the game. My research includes psychology, alchemy, history, mythology, and more. This is not one of those videos. Welcome to the unhinged, but honestly surprisingly accurate story of Marika is a jar, or jar god, or something meant to resemble a jar due to her past tragedy video. With me, Sinner Tarnished, as your personal guide through this curious connection between the Great Jars and Marika the Eternal. The horrific tragedy of Marika and her shaman kin has been covered pretty well by now, and I don't want to just regurgitate the same information you have probably heard, but I do have to provide some context for my unhinged theory, so bear with me as I quickly hit the highlights of the horrors of Bonny Village. So apparently Marika is a shaman, which I actually think answers a lot of the mysteries of the base game, which I will be making videos on soon, so click that subscribe button to stay up to date on those. Anyways, shamans were hunted down and stuffed into pots by the Hornsent in an attempt to ascend them into sainthood. It was such a horrific ritual that to complete this act, the Hornsent had to wear masks to suppress any feelings of doubt that what they were doing might be wrong. It seems that Hornsent did this to every single shaman, as evidenced by the minor Erdtree incantation. Secret incantation of Queen Marika, only the kindness of gold without order. Marika bathed the village of her home in gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. Why did the Hornsent specifically target the shaman? Shamanism and what that entails deserves its very own video, which will be coming soon. But here are a few headlines that stick out that may answer this question. First is that shamans are those who can communicate and interact with the spirit world. Basically, they can talk with the dead and direct their spirits in a very particular way. Secondly, shamans seem to have this unique ability to merge with other beings. The flesh of shamans was said to meld harmoniously with others. The Bonny Butcher's Knife completes this recipe for sainthood, weapon of the greater potentates of the Bonny Village. An outsized butcher's cleaver used to dismember human bodies and the making of the great jars stored in the jails. So it seems like these greater potentates, or rulers, hunted down and butchered all manner of folk, stuffed them into great jars and added a shaman, sealed the jar and waited for some sort of ascension, a being who melds harmoniously not only with the flesh of the other occupants of the jar, but also the spirits, a divine being, a being who is many but one. Before we move on, I have a question for all of you. Do you think that House Hoslow are the descendants of these greater potentates? Potentate just means a monarch or ruler, which seems to fit Dalos. He uses a whip as a weapon, reminiscent of the tooth whip, and he ends up defending the jars with his very life. It seems very George R. R. Martin-like to have a character arc in that way. Anyways, thought it was a cool connection, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, back to the Great Jars. I can only imagine that the success of sainthood relies heavily on the quality of ingredients in this horrific sainthood recipe. In other words, who the greater potentates butchered and stuffed into the pots with the shaman. Because the shaman can communicate, interact, and direct spirits of the dead, and without a doubt, those butchered by the potentates are dead, it would follow that the quality of the sainthood, or flat-out success of it, would solely depend on the quality of the spirits stuffed into the jar with the shaman. Let's say in one pot you have a shaman, and then you have Janice from accounting, a 97-year-old cat lady, your elementary PE teacher, and Derek, who lives in his mom's basement. The spirits that shaman is communicating with more than likely won't turn this amalgamation into a saint. My guess is that they will end up like all the other shamans we see in the jails, a hideous monstrosity of a former human being. Scraps of stewed flesh cling to the shard, and tatters of ornaments can be seen mingled within the slime, relics of ancient royal warriors, perhaps. Now, imagine a pot filled with a powerful warrior, a devoted follower, a charmer, a prideful person, a blasphemous person, and a headstrong person with a spirit of resistance. If you had a shaman capable of directing and communicating with those spirits, what happens? Sainthood? Unimaginable power? We don't even have to speculate this part, as Alexander's questline shows us that the quality of the innards directly reflects the vessel that is enveloping those innards. A keepsake of the warrior jar Alexander, found at the core of the dead flesh that once filled the great jar. The jars contain dregs inherited from those who came before. Thus, our warriors pass from jar to jar, carrying dreams of greatness. As Umbreon721 from my Discord pointed out so aptly, this practice is not unlike the practice of the Eternal Cities to forge a new lord. As they put it, quote, do some fucked up shit to make a new god, end quote. In fact, this practice of essentially grafting in hopes of some sort of ascension is very prevalent in Elden Ring. Silver Tears in the Eternal Cities, Graven Masses in the Academy, Godrick and his whole thing, and perhaps the very origin of the idea, the horn scent and the great jars. Miyazaki said in his IGN and Edge magazine interviews that the Elden Ring is the name given to a mysterious concept that defines the world itself. The Elden Ring is metaphysical. The rings that you were looking at in a logo are not so much representation of those factions, as you put it, but more representation of the law of the world, the rules and the order. This golden order is something that the Elden Ring may have once represented, but not directly. It's more about how you apply those rules and how you enforce them on the physical world, and what effects they have on it. So it's more the influence of these demigods that existed a long time before, and how they applied these concepts of order and discipline. That's what's being represented by the Elden Ring and these overlapping and intersecting rings. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but I'll leave it there for now. Smiles. To paraphrase, the Elden Ring is metaphysical, meaning it's outside the understanding of the human senses, something that can't be measured. And it's the laws of the world, the rules and order. And it's about how you enforce or direct its power on the world through these demigods that existed long ago. Before we dive into the territory of the unhinged, let's quickly recap what we know. Great jars are vessels that are stuffed with all kinds of innards and their spirits. A shaman is added to these jars in hopes of birthing a saint or a lord or a god, whatever the horn scent's agenda was. Shamans are used because they have a unique ability to communicate and direct said spirits. We know that the power of the vessel is directly related to the quality of the innards of said jar. We know that shamans have a unique ability to meld with others and essentially form the one out of the many. We know that Marika was completely traumatized by these events and sought revenge on those who hunted down her people. We know that the great jars can crack and break, but also mend themselves. We know that Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, which is made up of great runes, the stuff of demigods, as told to us by Enya. We know that these great runes corrupt their bearers and seem to have their very own singularly focused motivations. We know that the Elden Ring and the great runes are metaphysical, and not an actual physical thing that can be held. Okay, stick with me because this is where things get strange and enter the realm of total speculation. To start, let's look at the seal on the shaman's heads. I can only assume that this is something carved into their heads by the horn scent as a way to identify the shaman. It looks eerily familiar, doesn't it? It looks like a horn scent with the rune of death overlaid on it, or the mystical third eye, which is a symbol of spiritual connection, enlightenment, and insight. It also shares similarities with the Elden runes and the Elden Ring itself. The Elden Ring is nestled in the belly of Marika. She is its vessel. The Elden Ring is made up of great runes that have to do with demigods and the laws of the world. Demigods who came from long ago. These great runes infect the children of Marika and possess their holder with their mad taint and incredible power. Marika is also a shaman, someone capable of communicating and interacting with spirits, and whose flesh melds harmoniously with others. The relationship between the Elden Ring and Marika sounds incredibly similar to the relationship between the shamans and those butchered spirits that occupy the pots with them. Even down to the very map itself. For so long, the community has questioned who these giant bodies belong to. I am suggesting that these bodies are the butchered bodies of those within this metaphorical jar. They are the very bodies that constitute the innards, the world of the jar, and thus the lands between. They literally make up the very foundation of the map. What if Marika was the one shaman that actually had a successful ascension into sainthood, and this is where she gained her healing powers from? Saints are often known for healing or protecting others. What if the Hornsent saw this as an act of kindness they did to Marika and her people? She is, after all, ascended. Although it's clear Marika didn't see it as a gift. She returns to her village and saw that no one was there. Everyone was stuffed into jars and imprisoned within a jail. She realizes that she was the only one left, the only one to come out of this tragedy. And in that moment, she plots her revenge. With her newfound strength and abilities, she condemns the Hornsent and sets in motion their genocide and her transformation into a god. The Hornsent, seeing that what they did was a positive thing, view this as a betrayal. They did, after all, ascend her. She is their Frankenstein master who turns on her creators. Marika, now accompanied by and in control of these powerful spirits, uses her former mark of victimhood and turns it into the most powerful item in the universe, the Elden Ring. However, we must keep in mind what Miyazaki himself said. The Elden Ring is metaphysical, so Marika or whoever didn't actually create something physical. It's more symbolic or metaphorical. Just like she was once stuffed into a jar with butchered corpses to commune with their spirits, she now holds those spirits and their power within herself. She becomes the Great Jar. She becomes their vessel. A vessel for their rage, fears, pride, and hatred. A vessel for their intense loyalty and sense of hope. For something better. Better than this. When Marika shatters the Elden Ring, she shatters and cracks herself open, unleashing these powerful spirits upon the world. Demigods, being Marika's children, inherit these spirit-filled great runes who corrupt them, turning them into twisted figures of their former selves. Something else happens when Marika shatters the Elden Ring. She cracks, and her former body turns into cracked stone, and her head falls off. Her stone body looks like, well, a cracked pot, a former place of horrific tragedy transformed into incredible strength. Now, do I buy into this wild speculation? I honestly don't know. The story of turning tragedy into strength is not a new concept and would actually fit well within the narrative of the game. Wearing your scars as a badge of honor is a very human thing indeed. I certainly don't think, and hopefully didn't come across that Marika is a literal great jar, but a metaphorical one. She seems to be able to house within herself these powerful spirits. That is quite literally her origin story. It could explain the design of the Elden Ring. It could explain why the Great Runes seem to represent a very singular emotion or identity. It could explain why her body turns into stone when she cracks. It could explain the very nature of shamans and their potential. It could explain the reason why she uses healing spells and her divinity. She is a saint. It could explain the betrayal the Hornsent felt. If the lands between is a metaphorical great jar, and Marika is the shaman that can control the spirits of those that dwell within, does that explain the process of Erdtree burial and being born of the Erdtree? Marika is able to pick and choose which spirits she wants to remain in her vessel, and which ones she can sacrifice and let go of. What if we are just the latest of countless spirits summoned by Marika the shaman? What if Grace is just that? Marika's shamanistic abilities controlling and directing spirits. Perhaps this further elucidates the true meaning behind the starting area, Limgrave, and the atrocities taking place there. Scraps of flesh for filling great jars, rancorous spirits clinging to the pinkish-red rotting meat. This is what becomes of the condemned, who get sliced up and stuffed into jars to become saints instead. Perhaps we are just the latest scrap of meat, butchered and stuffed into a jar, so Marika could control our spirit. Not only that, but Godrick's Great Rune is the dead center, the anchor rune of the Elden Ring. Everything else connects to that, just like grafting. A Great Rune of the Shardbearer Godrick. Its blessings raise all attributes. This Great Rune is known as the Anchor Rune, found in the center of the Elden Ring. The first demigods were the Elden Lord Godfrey and his offspring, the Golden Lineage. Godrick has the ability to graft others onto him, and so too does it seem that the Elden Ring grafts other Great Runes to itself. What if Godrick represents so much more than previously thought? What if he represents a microcosm of not only the Elden Ring, but of Marika's journey and her motivations?
Mighty dragon, thou the true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. Lonely tarnished. Plain as a lord. I command thee now. I am the lord of all that is golden. I am the lord of all that is golden. And one day we'll return together to our home, bathed in rays of gold.
What if everything that we are seeing in game are just spirits of those stuffed into Marika's great jar? If Godfrey is the first demigod, would it follow that his scrap of flesh was the first to go into her jar? Their flesh melded together and created offspring? I don't know, but I find it odd that Marika is birthed by grafting. And the Anchor Rune raises all attributes, and has the ability to graft as well. We have to assume that this Great Rune was the very first, and without the ability to graft, perhaps the Elden Ring would never come to be. Just like without Marika, the Shaman, these other spirits would not be able to meld together. If you are new to my channel, we have long speculated that these Great Runes were all fragments of Marika, all cogs in the grandfather clock that is Marika. They each have such a particular emotion and agenda. They aren't fully fledged people, but rather fragments of one. This finally answers that question. These Great Runes are spirits, or poltergeists, that have a mind of their own. This explains why they are able to possess and change their holder. Marika is the vessel, the mother of all these spirits. She was the perfect recipe for sainthood and ascension. The perfect spirits, coupled with her shamanistic abilities, granted her immense power. Without knowing, the Hornsent created the monster that would destroy them. When I first started writing the script, I thought it would just be kind of this fun, head-tilting, and curious similarity between the Great Jars and Shamans, and Elden Ring and Marika. Something fun to write about and speculate on. However, as I started to dig in and pull more and more on this thread, the more it unraveled and began to honestly make sense. It can explain a lot, or it could explain nothing, and that very sentence is the way Miyazaki portrays his stories. I'm really curious to hear all of your thoughts, so let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I will leave you with this final thought and image. When Marika smashes the Elden Ring and cracks her body in the process, the Great Runes are no longer bound to her flesh. The vessel and the innards are no longer bound together. And after we defeat the demigods, collect the Great Runes, and mend the Elden Ring, a very important step must first occur. We must put her head back on. It is only after we put her head back on that the Elden Ring glows and returns to its rightful home and owner. If she is meant to resemble or reflect a jar, the origins of her saint and godhood, what would her head resemble? The lid of the jar, perhaps? Resealing the vessel that contains these long-lost spirits? Thank you all so much for watching and for the unbelievable support in my last video. It means more than you guys know. As I stated earlier in this video, I believe Marika being revealed as a shaman answers a ton of questions, such as Torrent's true master, the spirit calling bell, remembrances, and so much more. But that will have to wait for my next video, where we will uncover the truth of Marika the shaman. As always, much love, and I'll see you in the next one.